Hey everybody, welcome again to HN News. We've got Josh Wong. He's ThinkLabs founder and CEO, and they do some interesting things in the electrical grid, things that we all depend upon these days. Josh, welcome. How are you doing?
Hi, Julian. Great to be here with you today.
All right. Well, first of all, give us a bit of a background on the what does ThinkLabs do in the grid?
Yeah, ThinkLabs is a specialized AI development and deployment company. We focus on critical infrastructure. So we understand that AI in particular is at a time where it can go beyond the regular chats or productivity, but it can be actually applied on very mission critical industrial or infrastructure processes. And we want to specifically apply these to the electrical grid because that's our mission to drive towards global sustainability. Now the grid has been here, we take it for granted, turn the lights on and when we flip the switch, but the grid's getting infinitely more complicated than before. One, it's a very old infrastructure, like dating back to like the Edison days, so 130 or so years or so ago. But two is now there's increasing complexity on the grid, things like solar, things like wind, electric vehicles, which, well, we all have electric vehicle targets, things like demand response, like smart thermostats, battery storage, which becomes a very variable and sometimes unpredictable assets. So with all these knobs and levers in the grid on top of an aging infrastructure, on top of a $1 trillion industry that hasn't really innovated as much before, given its regulated monopoly, critical infrastructure nature. We think there's a huge complexity bubble coming up. So the complexity of the grid, the unpredictability and the volatility of the grid will threaten, well, the reliability, resiliency, as well as security and affordability of the grid. Well, we just can't keep paving new lines and power lines and cables and wires. And so, really, with AI or with software empowered by AI based intelligence, we can maximize the use of the existing infrastructure while make better decisions into planning for the next critical decade, which we believe would be the critical decade where the battle and the war for energy sustainability will have to be won.
Josh, I think you're going to become the superhero for the next decade, right? Because sometimes you look at this grid, right, and we got wires running across the streets these days. Still, it's almost like on the most archaic system you can possibly imagine, that's been put together like a Frankenstein band-aid solution. You almost think that if we shut down for about a few months and just rip and replace everything, might be might be great to start over. And while they're at it, maybe they should put the electrical grid underground so we don't have these wires, running across the streets and so on.
Yeah.
When you look back at this electrical grid thing, right? And how we sort of just, I don't know, I didn't even know how it's been done,
Uh,
piecing together this Frankenstein that we've got today, right? I mean, are we really just trying to make a Frankenstein look pretty, or is it time for us to rebuild?
well, you don't know how many debates I've had with people outside the industry where you just can't packetize electrons. You just can't beam it through midair. It's a very complex analog driven by all partial differential calculus, like really physics driven grid. And so we need the infrastructure. Now, of course, it's always a nice debate to go all underground, but your bill is going to probably go up 10 times if we put everything underground.
Do it for cheaper is the key.
Yeah, exactly. Then there is the whole camp where, hey, let's just everybody self-generate so we can have microgrids everywhere instead of rely on the shared infrastructure. But as with all things, there's economies of scale, and electrical generation is one big part of it. So can we continue with a hybrid decentralized architecture? So really we leverage the economies of scale of the larger power plants and sharing electricity with everybody, because not often I'll be when I have my peak usage may not be your peak usage, so we all sort of balance each other out and do that. So while I think we each have increasing capabilities with what we call distributed energy resources, my own rooftop solar, my electric vehicle charging, my batteries at home. So I think the assets side is going through regular sustainable innovation. sustaining innovation. So that's the past like 10, 15 years. Honestly, like, from my side, it's getting a bit boring because we have solar is getting more cheaper and cheaper. It's a
Yeah.
steady decrease in cost. Solar, wind, storage, etc. Now electric vehicles the hot thing, but its next thing might be well, heat pumps or whatnot. But it's the coordination, like it's seeing things as a whole, not seeing things as an individual piece of asset that's going to get cheaper and cheaper. So it's really the traffic control of this grid.
Mhm.
And so the electrons or the generation consumption storage is one Frankenstein. The wires is another Frankenstein. But the third is actually the data layer. A data layer with utilities tend to be, well, suffering in data quality, and a lot of costs, manual labor, etc., is actually put into assess, clean up data. And today it's mostly done by human intuition, engineering judgment, perhaps some AI in connecting dots with lines. If not, you gotta drive out trucks or fly drones, which is very expensive. So really, we see an opportunity for AI to take all the real-time measurements and signals, like from SCADA, from smart metering, pass it through what we call a physics-informed AI model. So getting physics or engineering to train an AI to repeat itself, to basically mirror and become a surrogate, and then take all that field measurement data and back validate and clean original source data. So that's another sort of vector of innovation that we're addressing.
Interesting. It just seems that this problem is going to become more and more sophisticated. Um, but I'm going to dig into that after. But Josh, give me a bit of your background. Like, how did you get into this game? It seems very, very difficult. What was your journey?
It's definitely not easy, but it's worth it. It's worth it, right? All great things require persistence and conviction, right? So have been an electrical engineer by training. Really, when I went to the engineering school, it's more of, hey, you can get a job, rather than this is like a mission driven thing. But during early years of my studies, I think there was a guest lecturer from a German solar company showed me like pictures of how Germany in the early 2000s, late 90s, or probably late 90s, have been putting solar everywhere, and that just completely inspired me. And so since early in my educational academic life, I committed my career to renewables or to global sustainability. So after that, I worked on fuel cells, worked on electric vehicle charging, battery storage. Early days in utility, so always been sort of a first in kind type of guy. Did my first like thesis on virtual power plants back in the mid
Wow.
about 2000s. Then joined the utility, became like sort of founded the R&D team, wrote legislation and policy for smart grid again back in the late 2000s. Did all the first in kind like microgrid, battery storage, electric vehicle charging, sensors, smart metering, data analytics projects. So a lot of firsts, and afterwards, then left behind a 25-year roadmap for smart grid. But we at that time wanted to move faster and share that with the rest of the world. So 2011 founded a company called Opus One Solutions, which focused on, well, modeling the grid and being really, really good at optimizing the grid when there are lots of renewables and DERs, all these parameters. At that time, early 2010s, you don't have like AI, you have AI, but not to the level of maturity and speed and focus today. And so it's cool, but it's like sprinkling on. It's not really the core AI first approach. So we're looking at it, but we're still leaning mostly on mathematical based. And so we became one of the top companies to run distributed energy management resource energy distributed energy resource management systems, the DERMS, used to the acronyms. Um, but we were focused on a grid-sided DERMS. So instead of knocking on people's doors and selling batteries and charging and smart thermostat and aggregating them to the utility, no, we focus on the utility side and really coordinating, becoming that gatekeeper between huge fleet of assets and critical utility operations. So always been that platform play. Then 2022 sold that off to GE. At that time, we were about 100 people in size, operating 8 countries. And shortly following joining GE as well, Guidehouse officially rated the DERMS as the world's #1 grid-sided DERMS. So it was good. It was good. I think GE took good care of it, but I needed to think about, well, the next big thing is in my blood. So really looked at within GE, looked at the grid of the future strategy, and specifically focused on autonomous grid orchestration. So big words, but just means, hey, everything can now shift and move, and all these dials and knobs and levers. How do we orchestrate all of these together? But it's going to be too damn complicated for the regular, like traditional process. Can we automate as much of that as possible? And so that became from strategy to an incubation, and then from an incubation to being what we believe as GE's first ever startup spinoff in April of this year as ThinkLabs.
Wow. Well, man, Josh, I'm really happy that you're in that driver's seat because it seems like we need at least one really amazing human to kind of like navigate this crazy thing we're in. I mean, so for we do understand orchestration, we do it in the cyber world all the time, right? So in the world of tech, right? We are to say we're dependent in power is an understatement, right? Just to have our internet down for like 10 minutes, we humans will, go bonkers, right? And the challenge is, there's lots of pressures, right? Headwinds in the power systems. We've got, fire stuff. We've got the climate change is causing a lot of challenges. We don't want to talk about that ice thing we had many, many years ago. But we still got, fires and floods, and we were seeing lots of things around the world that's impacting this.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many headwinds. It's almost like you figure like, what do we do, right? And for the world, I know the power companies, the ones who actually do UPS's type product to manage it, they've got these dashboards now, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can look at the globe or the country, and you could see all the brownouts, blackouts, and the potential problems with the grid. And when I looked at it, I go, wow, okay. So there's so many things, and we need power now, right? And my last pet peeve on it, and maybe you could shine some light on how we are going to move through this grid and leverage AI to kind of save the day, is it used to be when we were telling people, right, consumers and businesses, watch your use of electricity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look at the time you use it and all this stuff. Now we're saying, hey, let's plug in all these electrical cars. So it's like on one end we're saying save the power that you're using on your washer or dryer or whatever, and then
Totally.
hey, let's all buy an electrical car.
Yeah.
It seems to me it's very ironic. It seems, I don't know, maybe it's a different electricity that goes in the cars that I'm not aware about. But
Thing.
what's your, what's your thinking about the way we're using data? And I just want to squeeze in as well data centers,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
biggest, cookie monsters of electricity on planet Earth.
That's right.
Uh, all these things is on the grid.
Yes. Yes.
Are we going to survive this? What's your thoughts?
Again, next 10 years is the deciding factor. I think personally speaking, I don't think we have a lot of time left, and so I am burdened. I have three young boys, and 4, 6, and 8. So they are like we got to prepare for their future as well.
Yes.
So first of all, I think we need teamwork. I can't do it alone. I'm blessed to have a great team with me at ThinkLabs. Happy to have a great leveraging board at GE, which is probably the world's largest supplier of, like, I think about a third of the world's electrons go through is generated via the equipment. 40% of the grids is managed by GE software and others as well in the ecosystem. So we need really everybody to lean in. But it is the perfect storm, exactly as you said, right? We have an aging, like congested, constrained infrastructure, plus other storms and wildfires and everything. And then we sort of think that there are maybe going to be a tripling effect of consumption. So we have the traditional electrical loads. Then we have now the onsets of data centers, right? Let's look at Microsoft's and Google's latest sustainability report. Just because of the rise of AI, all the sustainability metrics is going down. So it's challenging. And then for data centers, you can't just offset it with renewables. You need stable backup power as well, which typically means gas, right? You can only do so much with batteries for now. Then you have, well, let's not forget Bitcoin mining that really increased a ton of consumptions as well. And then we have two major industries of energy usage that needs to sort of fuel transition into the electrical space. One is transportation, as you referred. The other is heating. Heating in North America, I live in Toronto. We heat all the time. It's pretty much like the bulk of the modern world is on gas, and the rest of the world is, well, still on oil and other forms of fossil fuel. So this is the perfect storm. And when we look at the level of increase of consumption on an aging infrastructure, I think we can track back the exact number, but I think IEA had a report around like $50 trillion really focus on infrastructure upgrades. Now, $50 trillion in 10, 15 years, that's how we're going to spend that with supply chain issues, with even substation transformers having long lead times in the order of years, right away, excavation and all the construction costs and wastes, right? Because construction has a huge environmental impact as well. And can we build enough renewables in time? And can we stabilize and levelize the variable outputs in time? So we think we need all solutions, not one. But if we look at what can we act quickly, we think software is the way to go. So with that, let's double click into software. So traditional like software is humans learning software. That's the good old SaaS model. But power system software is really, really complicated. And you requires an engineer or lots of configuration screens. You need your masters and PhDs. And it's just hard to use. It looks like it's dating back to the 90s. So then if we want to go faster, can we automate? But now power systems formulas is very hard to scale as well, because those are heavily like to be a bit more specific, heavily non-convex, non-linear optimizations. So these are hard, big problems. It's always is a good analogy to compare power systems formulas to like general relativity or quantum mechanics, but in a very large scale as well, because you have so many lines. So where we come in is we think AI has a role to play, and instead of asking AI to just clean data to run traditional power systems engineering formulas better, which is what all the companies do, we basically explored and championed the AI surrogate model. Can we get the traditional power system software data points, run a lot of scenarios, tens of thousands to millions of scenarios of all types of generation consumption patterns? We'll map all the input outputs and sort of remap them with neural networks and various other forms of machine learning models. And so it's trained by physics, it's bounded by physics, but when we run in runtime, it's the AI. So instead of taking hours to run a time series analysis, forecasting, and then doing large scale optimization, maybe even ramping up some supercomputers, we run the AI, which is like sub-seconds and very much trained and tuned. Now, so we can do specific problems and scale that to very large scale and run that very quickly. Plus, we can pre-train those with solutions such that when you have a congestion, here's the solution. It's a Google map, right? You see live traffic patterns, you hit a traffic jam, it helps you reroute all the time. It coaches the newer operators, because aging workforce and younger workforce that may not have seen all the corner cases of grid operations. We can walk them through and what I call it the Master Yoda mode, right? Can you have a chatbot that actually coaches people along and embeds the experience? And so I think that's where we are going. Now, there's still a key role to play with traditional engineering, because that's the ultimate truth, because that's how the world works. It's science, it's fundamental sciences. So when we want to explore more options or go back to first principles, continue with engineering, but for things that we just want to repeat all the time, for example, we're looking at 8760 calculations for all solar, all circuits, 10 years ahead. Can we run those very quickly? The answer is yes, we can. And so we think this real-time scaled pre-trained intelligence really has a key opportunity in today's age.
It's this area is so fascinating to me. I remember when this interview opportunity comes across about electrical grid. My first question is, do we really want to bring another big problem to the world, and shine light on it. And because right now we're dealing with cybersecurity, we've heard about how the bad actors are attacking the grids, and how that needs to be protected in many many ways. And I'm sure you see that as well, right? And how the bad actors, it's like we don't have enough headwinds. Let's just sprinkle in a little bit of cyber attacks on the grid.
Mm.
And I think we all know that the bad actors, especially state actors, that's the kind of things that they go after, because that can impact the most damage,
Yeah.
relatively quickly. Um, I know you're not in the cybersecurity game, but what's your take on how cybersecurity could impact this? And maybe, at the end of the day, with your AI, decision making solution, that's probably the only way to sort of divert a breach once it's happened. Like, what do we do if we do get a breach? What's the scenario there?
Yeah, well, that's a very deep question. I think you said it right. One, do not profess to be a cybersecurity expert, but we are trying to protect a critical infrastructure for energy security as well. So that's the ultimate objective, right? I think with AI now, I think both the bad actors and on the playing on the defense side, we need AI to up the game, right? Because now AI is being used to as the attack vectors. Now, I think the more we can, from my angle, from my scope, the more we can protect the grid dynamically rather than plan, build, set, and forget, the better.
Yeah.
So bad actors, or let's say hitting a power plant or hitting a substation, that becomes to me electrically very similar to a storm.
Mm.
And so, how do we dynamically understand the impact on the grid, isolate the certain aspects so it doesn't cascade down to greater areas? How reroute, help restore? I think that's the key one. Because ultimately, yes, the networks can be hit, but typically its impact is not the entire grid all at once within that sub-second or sub-cycle time frame. So it's cascading. So the more we can contain that, the better. So continuous real-time situational awareness and event mitigation, I think that's is the 1-2 punch behind initial like defense in depth type on the security systems.
Sir, Josh, is exactly how the cybersecurity game is played in corporations and businesses. You got to, detect, right, isolate,
Yes.
figure out what the hell's going on, and then, mediate and, fix the problem, right? Because, the bad actor is definitely going to find a way. And it's quite interesting because I think you just hit the nail on the head there, that, you know, understanding real time impacts on the grid is the best. I would say the only way we can know if we're really under attack or not. Maybe it's because of the weather. Maybe it's because of some things are falling apart in the infrastructure. Maybe it's, Jane or Joe pressing the wrong thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or a cyber attack, right? But at least something weird anomaly is happening, and you kind of isolate until you figure out like what the hell is going on. Um, this is it's quite interesting that you're doing this stuff. So let's double click on the AI aspect. I mean, of course, we won't say that AI is going to even take more juice, more electricity to all the other data centers, but um, now we're using this technology to sort of like monitor and I guess optimize the
Mm.
efficiency of the grid, right?
Yes.
What is it? Give me a before and after type look. Before, here's what it looks like. After Josh's system with ThinkLabs, here's what the world looks like from a grid perspective.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for that. So we actually try to mirror or map the SAE standard for autonomous driving and what that looks like for the grid as well. So level 0 is complete manual, 1 to 2 is the human drives and machine assists. And when you go for levels 3 to 5, the machine drives, human can override and recommendations, etc., to full automation mode. So by and large, today for most, well, let's say small utilities, they're still in like 50, 75% manual mode. Then
Mhm.
a lot of larger utilities are in human driving machine assisted. So it's really still the operator operating the grid through years of training, experience, coordination, business rules. So the human factor, intuition factor is still critical, especially when complex situations. But there's a lot of day to day, right? Locking and tagging, calling trucks and crews out, answering customer calls. Those are still very much manual functions. Then there's a layer of advanced analytics on top of today's solutions. But the advanced analytics, to be frank, it's not a lot of people use it because it's very hard to use. It's well traditional engineering formulas. It's lots of configurations. You need your education to interpret the results. It's not automated. It's running a simulation. And when you take traditional engineering and throw that into the data quality issues of real time, you have convergence issues. You have scalability issues. So you might not always get a solution. And when you get a solution, you might not even trust it because ultimately the grid is an extremely underdetermined network, meaning that there's a ton more variables than what we can actually measure with SCADA or smart metering, etc. So when AI comes in, AI is naturally probabilistic. You might not have all the data inputs. So you have all the data inputs, then knowns equal unknowns, and you can solve with formulas. But the reality doesn't work that cleanly. It is the Frankenstein as we started in the beginning. So now, so can we train an AI to see all types of situations and then based on its training or just call it intuition, snap into the most likelihood scenario so you have the most trustworthy results. This is what we call state estimation or AI-driven state estimation to calculate critical grid variables like voltages, currents, power, like real reactive power, all across the grid. So that provides the experience-wise as close as what we can get to Google Maps. You're not running a traffic study that's a week out, 10 years out. You're not trying to build capital planning on roads here. You're trying to operate. So can you get real time every single few seconds or even second, get a fresh update of the traffic patterns? If you have a congestion caused by, let's say, too much electric vehicle charging on one side, look at how you can reroute power or let's say fire up batteries or curtail EV charging even through a pricing program or see what you can do on the solar side and based on their location and based on their configurations and contracts even, right? So it's always techno-economical and a bit of social as well. So then the proposal of the solutions is pre-trained. So back to like comparison, right? In past engineering, we set a handful of scenarios, right? Engineers, we do like 3 scenarios and we get 3 outputs and then we choose one of the 3, typically the middle one. But
It
here,
always sounds better than ARC.
exactly. Multiple choice always goes for C, right?
Yeah.
Universities. But here is we can pre-train off all types of potential scenarios and corner cases and extreme events. And so whenever we see that event, we are ready. So that pre-training is critical. The role of reinforcement learning in that case is critical because we have just way too many variables for classical optimization to do. The last piece is how do we consume? How because there's always like my belief is there's always going to be human in the loop because there's always going to be cases where the AI just haven't seen before. We need to be humble. We need to be responsible as the AI in such a critical infrastructure. So I think for the humans to be able to consume that information, there is a real role for LLMs. So I'm not asking LLMs to learn about the grid and power flow. I don't see that yet, to be frank. I see deep learning as critical to become a surrogate model, but not LLM to just learn power flow by itself through unsupervised learning. But now we can train off all the human experiences with rules and business processes with what we call the AI digital twin of the grid, the surrogate model, with any type of documentations or large learning. So, and historical, what happened in the last storm, what happened with the last outage. So all that can be synthesized into a coach, a virtual operator, a digital assistant for the what we call the control room of the future. And that can be synthesized also for the planning team as well as they look at investments and interconnecting all the solar and storage and wind onto the system. So that's really the world of AI. Just to summarize again,
Mm.
power physics train the AI, AI get a digital twin to become the AI surrogate model of the grid, then co-train that with all the experience, all the documentation, business rules, etc. to become both a automation assistant and a coach for the humans side. So that's where we see AI fundamentally playing a role. It's a lot faster than putting up new poles and wires. We will still need that because if we talk about tripling the capacity, we will still need that. But this becomes a quick remedial action because that can be fired up pretty quickly.
You know, Josh, it's I sit here and in my head, I see the parallels in the cybersecurity world that we're facing with globally, with everybody's their own little grid. Everybody's a company getting attacked, from pet store to a government to a bank, right? They're all getting attacked every day, and it's roughly the same gate, you know. In our world, we call it the left to boom and right to boom, right? Left to boom. The boom is like when something explodes, and the left of boom, you got to do whatever you can do to prevent the boom. But then once the boom happens, whenever the grid goes down, you better have a right of boom strategy to bring it back up fast, right? It's a challenging game you're playing with. Um, it's honestly, I being in tech, I the only future I see for the grid is through what things that what you're doing. There is no plan B. That is the plan A. That's the only plan that makes sense. This aging grid for sure. It's so, Frankenstein, and I don't even think people understand what they did 30, 40, 50 years ago, um, let alone if those engineers are still around to
Mm-hmm.
explain what happened. And we all know training the next generation is not that easy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's a bit of they don't have enough, people to train as well. And so we need to have AI augment that training and that learning curve. Um, I'm going to leave you the last word here, Josh. What do you want the world to know about what you guys are doing, and why Think Labs, what you're doing for the grid, is is important for the future?
Yeah, I think it has to be a huge collaboration, right? ThinkLabs, I think we are always trying to be at the forefront, bleeding edge, tip of the spear, whatever we want to call it. Um, as you mentioned, the parallels with the cybersecurity world, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. The patterns we apply to the electrical system is what we are learning from you guys from the cyber world, from the traffic or autonomous driving, from even aerospace, etc. But this sector has just been so slow to move in the past decades that we're sort of creating this huge bubble of the need to suddenly very quickly innovate and move fast because we ain't got a lot of time left. And so we'll continue to lead the way, but we really want to continue like fostering an ecosystem approach because it's way bigger than us alone. Hopefully, we can prove out a lot of strong use cases and continue to champion on the technology and product side, working with the various like consultants, system integrators, strategic folks, regulatory folks to move this along. But if there's probably my last word is I've been in this industry for 20 plus years, not the longest, right? There's a lot of people with 30, 40 years experience, but long enough has at the first in a kind type of approach. But my learnings about this industry is it either doesn't move or when it moves, we pour billions and trillions at it. And so I think it's a very, very exciting time for this sector to finally have it take its place on the innovation cycle and catch up, but also continue to provide a safe, reliable, renewable, affordable power to the masses. I think that our duty, and AI will continue to be a double-edged sword where it increases consumption, but at the same time, we need it as a solution, and that's a new level of responsibility that we need to have with our responsible AI, which is understanding the carbon footprint, solving it, but also using those tools to accelerate the transformation of the grid. So I think this is the time, and really this is the year to make it happen. And I thank you all partners on the AI side to make this happen because this is a tool that we need today.
Well, I was happy before I talked to you. I'm a lot happier now because I know there's a path forward. In the world that I deal with all these tech giants, right? We always talk about, man, who's holding up that grid? You know, is it going to hold up? I mean, the biggest conversations I hear about data centers, like where can we put a data center? Who's going to give us that 10 gigawatt, whatever watts of power we need? And people are saying, no, don't bring your data center here. We don't even have enough ourselves, right? And it's becoming a bigger and bigger thing. Um, I don't even think people understand, honestly, how power is being consumed in the world. And it's almost like when I talk about the internet moving across oceans, we still got cables going across the ocean, right? So there's a lot of analog things happening. We're just pretty good at disguising it
Yep.
to make it look all digital. So for everything we say we're in a digital first world,
Yeah.
we are, run by an analog infrastructure. And if you want to know how bad analog is, drive along the streets and see all the constructions. That's that's another problem.
That's all right.
Um, Amazing stuff. I mean, please keep us posted what's happening with the grid. In the world of tech, the grid is oxygen
Hmm.
to us. If not, I'm not quite sure how we're going to run these systems.
Yeah.
Um, and everybody's got to figure out how to make this thing work. I don't know what the future is, but I think we got to keep in touch to figure out, how you're moving along and leveraging AI to help us solve these big problems. Anything else you want to add before we jump off?
No, I'm optimistic. We've got a lot of work to do, but we still, this is the right time. So I am happy as well. I'm leaving this conversation. Well, I'm happy and optimistic that we can solve it. And so the future, I would say again a safe, reliable, efficient, affordable, clean energy system that upholds the technology directions and the lifestyle that we want to have. So this is the time. So thank you very much, Jillian, for this time. I appreciate it.
Well, don't forget, Josh, us and your three kids depending on you. No pressure, right? So make it happen, brother. All right. The website for everybody to learn is ThinkLabs AI, I believe.
Yes, it is.
All right.
Perfect.
Take
Thank,
care, Josh.
thank you. Cheers. Yeah. Bye for now.